what we see in companies throughout our industry is that data's been stored, but we still don't quite know what to do with it in a way that's advantageous. So we've got massive amounts of data, and the large language models are giving us some opportunity to access that data in ways that we were never able to before.
The anxiety that we all feel as a group is like, hey, did we miss something? Are we behind? Are there? This is very, very early innings still.
And a lot of what we were talking about today was how do we improve our highly skilled workers, because we want to free them up to have the time to use their brains instead of doing what would be minutia work that we all get stuck with every day.
REZA Insights provides timely content from the real estate industry's preeminent thought leaders with insightful and thought-provoking strategies, best practices, and intelligence covering the relevant topics of the day to help inform our clients and the broader real estate community. REZA Insights is brought to you by REZA Investment Group and is moderated by Reza Ettadali, CEO and founder of REZA Investment Group. Today's discussion includes a diverse panel of industry experts.
Hello, everyone. This is Ramez Barsoon with REZA Investment Group. We would like to wish each of you and your families a happy holiday season. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, AI and its impact on commercial real estate. Our panel will be exploring how AI is reshaping the commercial real estate industry, influencing everything from investment strategy and underwriting to operations, tenant engagement, and asset management. Separately, we will be hosting our next Meeting of the Minds webinar on January 29th of next year. More information on the details of that event will follow in the coming weeks. As a reminder, all participant lines are currently muted. We're honored to be joined by our keynote speaker, Steve Weikal, Industry Chair of the Real Estate Transformation Lab at the MIT Center for Real Estate and Managing Partner of Met Fund 2, an early stage fund investing in MIT connected startups. Steve will be joined by the following group of expert panelists who are at the forefront of applying AI within the built environment. Michael Beckerman, CEO of CREtech. Mark Moshayedi, Managing Partner of Space Investment Partners. J.M. Schapiro, CEO of Continental Realty Corporation, and Sandy Sigal, President and CEO of Newmark Merrill Companies. We'd like to extend our sincere thanks to each of our speakers today for sharing their time. And with that, I'll turn it over to our CEO, Reza Ettadali, to kick off today's discussion. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope that you find today's conversation both insightful and valuable. Reza?
Thanks, Ramez. Hi, everyone. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. Can't believe another year has gone so fast. As many of you know, AI is becoming a major topic of discussions, and I've personally spent a lot of time, through a lot of the relationship we have through my involvement with YPO, really seeing, is this going to be a short-term kind of a hype, or is this a major trend? And, it's definitely something that I think is going to be transformational. I was at the Berkshire Hathaway meeting earlier this year, and Warren Buffett said it could be a massive technological impact on the way companies are being run. Mark Anderson, who's one of the major tech investors, very well reputable, he said this is a tectonic shift on companies and societies. And so with that, we thought it'd be great to have a panel to discuss this of investors and also experts in the field. With that, I want to ask Steve Weikal, a very good friend. We've known each other, Steve, for about 10 years now, almost. I can't believe it. And Steve and I got to know each other when I was the chair of the real estate network in YPO. In fact, JM and Sandy were also past chairs. And so we were doing a MIT partnership with YPO, and I thought it'd be great to bring Steve's also expertise to our group of investor clients and friends. Steve is highly sought after. He just came back from Saudi, gave keynote speaks regularly overseas and with a lot of tech investors. So Steve, really appreciate you doing this, and please start your talk.
Yeah, delighted to be here, Reza. Thank you. Always a pleasure, and I really look forward to the conversation that we're going to have with the entire group. Um, what I thought I would do is maybe just do a bit of a level set, share a little bit of the research from MIT, maybe get everybody, those who are attending, I'm sure are in different parts of their journey in technology and their different parts of their journey in AI, and then I'll pose some big questions at the end that we've got a fantastic group of experts here that I look forward to having that conversation and hearing their perspective on it as well. And so let me begin by just doing a recap on AI. And this typically happens with technologies where we're not even still at the peak of, we're not yet to the peak of the hype cycle, if those of you who are familiar with the Gartner hype cycle, but there's a lot of hype around AI. And we hear this from the real estate industry, some urgency over what do I do next, and am I too late, and how do I keep up, and what do I do? And it's important to remember that AI generally has been around and been with us since 1956. Any of the technology that we use today when we got up in the morning has AI in it. So the idea of AI has been around a long time. And the earlier AI, up until these recent large language models and generative AI, the earlier AI, it analyzed. It had algorithms, which I'm sure you've heard of, but usually hard coded. There were, you would have heard of machine learning and natural language processing and computer vision. These were all swirling since 1956, and these breakthroughs were happening. So there was a long transition through this to get to the point of these LLM models, or large language models, LLMs. And let's not forget that ChatGPT, the first version of that, came out in 2018. So not a minute goes by during the day that we don't hear about AI and large language models and ChatGPT and all of their equivalents, but it's been around since 2018. And also to recognize that this version of it is called generative AI. And the reason, and that goes to the name, it generates because it ingests these immense quantities of data. It identifies patterns and it generates new material. And that comes out in the form of text and images and music and sound. And despite how smart it is, it still does not do spell check automatically in PowerPoint, as I just noticed. So, it goes to the idea that these LLMs are amazing, but they still make mistakes, and I'm sure we'll come back to that. But the important thing is that it really revolutionized, and this word often gets overused, but for those of you who have worked with these tools lately, the analytics and decision making are pretty jaw-dropping. They were when we first started looking at them, and they just get increasingly jaw-dropping. Um, so let me just give you just a quick demo for those of you who have not spent much time or a lot of time yet just working with ChatGPT or Claude or Microsoft Copilot or any of the other flavors. I'll give you a quick exercise that I show the students in class, and you can do this in a variety of different ways. We'll come back to it, but this is a PDF of a piece of property outside of London. It's a brownfield site. Those of us in the industry have seen these listing documents as long as we've been in the business, and you'll notice there is information on the site itself. There's some contextual information on the demographics and the location, and other information like access, what the method of sale is, and planning and things like that. This comes from Savills. So I like using Claude AI. And what I thought I would ask Claude is some very specific questions about this particular parcel. And so this, I'll show you in a moment, is what I'm going to ask Claude. I want Claude to underwrite this particular property. I want it to be detailed. I want a purchase price and an appropriate IRR for risk. And I'm giving it a risk-free interest rate of 4.5%, what I can borrow at and what I want the LTV to be. I want to exit after 10 years. And I'd like to know what the cap rate should be. And I'm telling it to make its own assumptions. Now, you could put 12 different quantifiers in to ask this question. But I just want a quick pass on a development opportunity. So I copy and paste it in, and then I upload the PDF. It's as simple as that. And then we hit go. And it's going to take a few seconds, maybe a minute. First, it's going to think, and then it's going to start generating. But I use this as an example. You could almost do any part of real estate asking this kind of question and uploading some PDFs. It could be legal documents, it could be the marketing materials, but you'll see that relatively quickly, we start getting what the assumptions were and some development assumptions and some recommendations on the types of housing and the cost of housing. But then we get into development costs, and Claude starts doing the financial analysis and the return on the investment. And you'll see we get some things that typically we teach in our courses. We teach how you do this in a spreadsheet. And let's not forget the spreadsheet turns 44 years old this year. Excel's been around 40 years. So it goes through and it spits out this investment recommendation. And you can always do a sensitivity analysis as well and go back. That takes a little longer. And now we know it will also draw up the site plans and do the massing studies and things like that. So it's just a quick demonstration to remind everybody the power of these tools. And we'll speak later about that. I was showing you a very rudimentary application. We've come a long way in 18 months. I've seen demonstrations that are much more complicated and much more nuanced and much more specific. So you might ask, what does this mean for workers? And because that demonstration says, well, how many analysts do I now need? If I can do this in 5 minutes, what used to take 5 days, I might be rethinking the role of analysts. And so MIT has done some work on what this means for workers. This is general, not only workers in our enterprise, but I think we also want to understand what this means for workers with our customers and the demand for space of our customers and the demand for all asset classes from our customers. So it's not only our own internal operations, but it's also how it's impacting our customers. So the first thing is that David Autor from the Sloan School, I like when he says that scarce expertise is becoming more abundant. It means that those of us knowledge workers and even academics, we don't necessarily have the monopoly on knowledge as much as we used to. So that is both good and bad, depends on what position you're in. But it is the reality. Other research from MIT that generative AI lifts performance of lower skilled employees. So now if scarce expertise is more abundant, those lower skilled employees, rising tide raises all boats. Those lower skilled employees are now becoming much more savvy and much more capable. At the same time, there's sort of conflicting research at MIT that the real improvement is with highly skilled workers are suddenly now hyper skilled because of AI. The research is not conclusive on whether this will have greater impact on lower skilled employees or greater impact on higher skilled employees. And actually, it comes down to what type of employee, what type of company, what type of sector. And we'll get to that in a moment. But what is true is that the complexity is moving behind the scenes and the simplicity comes to the forefront. You can see what I just did. All of that complexity of figuring out a spreadsheet goes into the background. I don't have to do that anymore. And Dror Proleg, who some of you may have seen him speak or read his posts, he says that Gen AI shifts work from point and click to describe and done. I think that's pretty cool. No longer in the future, we may not be doing these drop-down menus with clicking the boxes and hitting enter. We'll just be describing frankly, the way I did back here. And so if the description becomes the power, then that means those who best articulate the desired outcome will get the best results. So it's about asking the question in the right way. And those of you who have used some of these tools understand that you can get really detailed input. You can ask really detailed questions and get really detailed output. So what does that mean? As I said, different jobs, different impact. Goldman Sachs has done some good work on this. I wish I could say we've done the work. We've done some of the work at MIT, but Goldman Sachs put it together in a way that I think is very instructive. They broke it down into, what are there, 15 different categories here. There is architecture and engineering. Real estate is not actually on here, I don't think, but we do have architecture and engineering. But the key here is that the heavy blue, the dark blue, is virtually no automation into the future. The medium blue, the light blue, is an AI complement that they think AI, the research is showing that the AI will complement workers in this particular sector. And the gray, that's where there's likely replacement. So if you're in a job that is in the navy blue, if you're in building and grounds cleaning and maintenance, you're probably pretty safe. Your job's going to probably get better, but your job is probably pretty safe. But if you look down here in legal, those of you who are lawyers, I'm a lawyer. There's a pretty significant chance of the law business, some jobs getting significantly replaced. Also here in office and administrative, no surprise, that's happened over history. A little bit in architectural engineering, but a lot of AI complement. So this, I imagine, this is probably dated. This may be 6 or 8 months old. I suspect if they did it today, it would look a little bit different as we're starting to see the transformation take place. But the key takeaway here, different industries, different impacts. So if we have office tenants, if we have lawyer office tenants, I think the data is actually showing that law firms have been downsizing, but they've been growing. So you have this strange conflict where the companies are growing, so they take more space, but AI is allowing them to downsize, so that it's really a net conversation. So anyway, that I think is quite interesting. If we look at the overall workforce, then MIT thinks that 5% of the jobs will be replaced or heavily assisted by AI. Only 5%. So that then conflicts with other research that is saying that the AI adoption will lead to increased company growth in revenue, profits, employment, and profitability. So take employment out of it, yes. AI will probably have a favorable impact on revenues, profits, and profitability. The employment question is still fuzzy, though, and which jobs might get replaced. Maybe the alarmist headlines of 70% of jobs will go away, 90% of jobs will go away. That may be a bit premature. Could increase annual GDP. I think it's important to remember, though, that AI doesn't see anything outside of the data. It's only as good as the data that goes in. And I know we're going to talk about this with the other experts who are joining us today, that it's really important to ask the question properly, but also to understand where's the data coming from. Because those public LLMs, the demo that I just did for you with Claude, it's mostly going out into the internet. And we know that the internet is pretty much a cesspool of information. And so if you're getting, garbage in, garbage out is an old term from back in the day. It is so true now that if you're just relying on data from the internet, chances are you're not getting quality output from the LLMs. It will be more about the cleaner data, the proprietary data that gets unlocked in your enterprises. That's where we think the opportunity is. And overall, humans are still critical. Professor Fletcher, a guy named Professor Fletcher at Ohio State University, talks about 4 primal human powers that are unique to humans: intuition, imagination, emotion, and common sense. I added wisdom, and on our pre-call, somebody on the call, maybe Sandy, it was you who added subtlety. These are things that human beings have that I think it's going to be a long time before the machines are able to do that. Intuition, imagination, emotion, common sense, wisdom, and subtlety, there are more. But we all know that in the real estate industry, the secret sauce, our talent, is often tied up in these things, not so much about how good the algorithms are or how good the large language models are. So that's what it means to the workforce. So let me propose some big questions to the group, and I'd like to have a conversation about this. The first is, there's a massive why AI is ideally suited for real estate. I jumped ahead. I'll come back to the discussion questions in a moment. So now that we've done an update and a recap on AI, why is AI ideally suited for real estate? Well, massive amounts of fragmented proprietary third-party data. We know that we've been gathering data ever since storage got cheap, and it was easy to gather the data. But I would argue, really, what we see in companies throughout our industry is that data's been stored, but we still don't quite know what to do with it in a way that's advantageous. So we've got massive amounts of data, and the large language models are giving us some opportunity to access that data in ways that we were never able to before. We also know that there are many repetitive processes, especially in property management and construction, lots of repetitive processes that we sort of rebuild it every time. We reinvent the wheel every time. This is an opportunity to really automate a bunch of those activities. AI has this ability to rapidly process and interpret all of this unstructured information. And we could talk about the different asset classes, but there are a number of examples, and I hope that we'll get some today for you from the panelists, how AI is impacting all asset classes. I pick an asset class, it's changing already, and it will continue to change. And the AI is here to stay. Once you've used it, I use it every day now, and I thought I was a bit suspicious of it originally, and I thought, I don't really need that. I use it every day now. So that's really why this revolution is perfect for real estate. The timing is just right. So some big questions that I would pose to the group, and we can explore these, and we'll explore other things as well. The first is, what real estate jobs do we think are going to be eliminated, and what jobs will be enhanced in our industry? And again, this will be different by sector. The second is use cases and lessons learned. Even if jobs aren't eliminated or jobs aren't enhanced, what use cases have we seen where it is being applied, and what lessons are we learning that we can share? Another question that comes up is build or buy. Given that the technology is starting to be so easy to use, and companies, as you know, we see dozens, if not hundreds, of startups a month. It's so easy to stand up a company now because the coding is so easy, and you can really build the solution so quickly. What's the future of startups? We've had this relationship now for 15 or so years of the industry with startup companies helping to solve a lot of our problems. We do trials, everybody has proof of concept, but what's that mean now with this new AI? And then if AI is another step toward full automation, and my colleague, Professor Andreas Chagou, always painted a picture of fully autonomous, automatic real estate in the future, sort of science fiction-ish, but sometimes science fiction in the movies, it starts to come true. So we continue to head toward automation. Any of you in warehouse, the warehouse sector, that we're heading increasingly toward full automation. So what does that mean? What does AI mean for that, and what does that mean for our industry? And then also maybe we'll have a conversation about where do you even start without getting overloaded and overwhelmed by all of this, and not being overcome by the hype, which we're definitely in the hype. It's very high hype. Maybe we have more to go in the hype before there's a bit of an easing on that as well. So with that, I'll say thank you, and I hope that's a good place to start the conversation. Reza, I will turn it back to you.
Hey, Reza, I'm sorry to interrupt. We get the deck available so I can throw it into Gemini 3 to interpret what Steve just said?
Yeah, you can do that, Michael. That's fair. But you make a good point. We'll distribute that for everybody so that some of those data points, I think, are useful when you're talking to your investment committees, your teams, your customers. Feel free to use those data points, and you can search you can use GPT to get the MIT research that backs up some of the data points that I get. But Michael, you make a good point. You make a good point. I've done it. Okay, Reza.
Great. Hey, thank you so much, Steve, and we'll come back to you. With that, I've asked our panelists to give a 5-minute intro on what they do and how they're incorporating AI and their thoughts on AI. And then we'll have an open dialogue between all of us. So with that, Sandy Sigal, Sandy, could you give us your thoughts and your portion?
Lucky me, I get a false Steve. Okay, so So I'll give you a little background. So again, my name's Sandy Sigal at Newmark Merrill Companies. And I started as a computer programmer. So for those of you that were guessing I was a nerd before, it's absolutely true. And from 12 to 17, I was a programmer. And the reason
All right, Sandy, what was your first computer that you owned?
my first computer was a TRS-80, but I actually programmed on an IBM 360.
Cool.
So there you go. Punch cards.
Old school.
But we're not, we're not all youngsters like you, Dan. So and the reason I raise that is because, this is a repetitive process as technology takes over and how it impacts. As a matter of fact, there's a book called Future Shock that was written even before that talked about how people get disintermediated by technology and how technology treats society. This reminds me a little bit of when spreadsheets first entered the scene. Spreadsheets was the first application. You mentioned Excel from 40 years ago, but before that, there was VisiCalc, there was Lotus, there was Quattro Pro, there are a bunch of versions, and it transformed our business because what my boss used to do on pen and paper and took him an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours to do every time he changed something, I changed a couple numbers and it changed. And there was a gap between people who adapted and people who didn't. And eventually now everyone here, uses and understands how spreadsheets work. So the thing about our company is we have really two parts. One is we own today about 100 shopping centers, own and manage about 100 shopping centers. And two, we own a company called Bright Street Ventures, which invest in technology. Because for us, knowing where technology is going and understanding trends early is very, very valuable. So you could see, invest, try things quick, discard them, move on. And look, we were one of the early investors, and many people know in Placer. Placer today has become more of a noun of, hey, did you get the Placer data? We were an early adopter. And that's what happens with technology, right? You're an early adopter, then it becomes table stakes. And then if you don't adapt, you're behind, right? So I just want everyone to understand that change here it's not linear. It goes up and down and all around. And things that you think are going to happen, Steve's predictions are good today. And in 5 years, we'll look back, half will be right, half will be wrong. And that's just the way it is. And it's iterative. Okay. And so, I guess what I would address is the anxiety that we all feel as a group is like, hey, did we miss something? Are we behind? This is very, very early innings still. And this whole discussion, is it chat? Is it Gemini? Is it Grok? Is it this or that? I mean, again, early innings, we can hop, skip, and jump between them. One's going to be better one day, one's going to be worse, and you're going to see a lot of evolution. So, look, our strategy today is make sure as many people in our company can use AI. And again, we run AI together, but it's two things that are happening. One is the ability to ask questions in English, okay, using language as a connection tool, as opposed to, like Steve was saying, drop-down menus. That's a big change. I mean, drop-down menus, I think, will become a thing of the past. So that's one thing, being able to talk in English. That's what's changed the engagement between us and technology. And then the AI, the ability for something behind the scenes to supplement what a human could do much quicker than we can do it. And so for us, it's let people here democratize the use of this technology, see what comes up for them, see what their use cases are, and see how that leads us. And again, I think Steve talked on this. The type of people that I look at that we want to bring in, it used to be you wanted technical people. Were you great on, are you great on Excel? Are you great on writing? Are you great on this? Are you great on this? Today, it's more about adaptability and curiosity, right? Because today you want people who, as things change, can adapt to it. Don't get that deer in the headlights kind of scenario. And they're curious, because one of the things about curiosity is just because it looks good doesn't mean it's right. And AI generates a lot of things that look good, but they're not right. And this is what happened to our society when we started relying too much on spreadsheets. And all of a sudden we found out all sorts of derivatives should work a certain way because the math said it, but it wasn't right. And it didn't work out. And that led to a lot of bad outcomes in our society. So it's the ones who are curious, who look and use common sense and have the ability to question and be just a little bit skeptical that we want to bring in the door. It's not the ones that say, hey, look, I got it, here's my answer, and everything else. How it impacts jobs, I think it's the mechanical jobs that are really at risk, right? We're always seeing it with driverless cars, right? Someone who drove a car, one day we're going to look back and say, you drive a car for fun, you don't drive a car for any other purpose. That's a mechanical process. That's going to be replaced. In retail, you got some degree of service, stocking things. Those eventually going to be replaced. Parts of accounting, those are areas where you're going to see people's lives get a little easier because all that mechanical work they did to set things up gets done sooner. And we see that as being a big function. But I think that step one in getting engaged is don't just you get engaged, get your team engaged, get people engaged, ask them what they like and don't like, and make sure that they're trying different things and they're experimenting with different things. I think that soon enough, this conversation about AI is just an engine that's going to drive a lot of applications. You're going to buy into a ecosystem that's going to be powered by AI. You won't know whether you're on Chat or Gemini or whatever, and if they even exist in 5 years. And then this is going to be a backbone for automation and robotics, right? Because we have dumb robots, but you'll have smart robots, and that I think will become a big physical manifestation of AI in our world. And I think that's where we see it. I guess one of the questions you asked was build or buy. I think our strategy overall has been a little bit of both. We've invested in companies that, and we've invested enough where we can have say in what they do and how they do it. But generally this is not our area of expertise. We're real estate guys, so we tend to invest in companies that develop what we need. We own one company, Daytext AI, which is sort of an engine that drives a lot of our accounting, property management, leasing, all that kind of stuff. But even that gets connected to other data sources that feed it. But you got to also decide what you are. Do you want to become a technology expert, or are you really still in the real estate business and need technology partners? I think that's part of the decision. So I'll stop there unless I missed anything, Reza, that you wanted me to cover.
No, Sandy, it's great. I'll come back to you with a couple questions. How about you, JM? Go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Reza. And I'm CEO of a company called Continental Realty. So we own about 10,000 apartments and call it 8 or 10 million square feet of shopping centers. And so I think the word that I think about is journey. And I think that's what Steve said, that we're all sort of have to think about this journey that we're on. And so if I go back and think about the journey we started in data, right? Because I think data and AI is, we used to all talk about data. We hired a data scientist 6 years ago internally, Columbia economics and statistics major, superstar person. And then we as a company embraced that data, right? So Sandy might be the only one on this call who's been on Placer before we were, because we were customer number 50, and that probably comes from Sandy. But then we had this whole journey of, okay, we had Placer, but then we had something called Yodely. And we used Yodely 2 years before Placer even used it. It was credit card data. And we had a secret name for it that we told our investors. And then we went to Sensormatic, which is when you walk in or out of a store, and we use that. And then we went to Pass By. And what we started to realize on this journey is like what I thought originally would be, we would invest in all these prop tech companies. We would make millions of dollars in the prop tech companies. We also developed a relationship with CEOs. I started to realize that wasn't going to be what's going to happen, right? Do we like Camber Creek and all those other companies that are funds? Yes. But we then started realizing that actually the data sources that we wanted that would make a difference, because obviously we're all trying to deliver outsized returns, were in hedge fund conferences. So we shifted our entire focus to being at hedge fund conferences, which are like, wait, what are you doing there? And it's like, there's 70,000 data sources that they are selling in these hedge fund conferences, and we would be the only real estate operator there. And so then you start to find data sources that cover Uber Eats and DoorDash deliveries. So we have 450 million of those in our system, tracking them to try to figure it out within our shopping centers. Or you start looking at GPS deliveries on trucks, or you start looking at construction of multifamily. So that was the journey we took. And remember that we bought our first apartment community for $3,000 a door. and our first shopping center for $26 a square foot. So we've been doing this, for 65 years. And so what we realize is that you have to just get on these journeys and then commit your company to doing it, and then celebrate it, and then get out there talking about it. And I think that's a little bit what Sandy was talking about. So now what we've done is talk about AI, and we've moved over to AI and starting to think about how do we celebrate AI? How do we find the right uses for AI? How do we, within our entire organization, make sure they understand the importance of it without scaring them too much that they don't want to embrace it, right? Because there's a little bit of that goes on. And I think one of the things that comes up, I don't know, Steve, which version of Claude you were using for that demonstration?
Yeah, it was old. It was an old one.
Right, it was old. So
yeah.
By the way, old is really old, truthfully, because if you haven't tried 4.5, which came out 3 weeks ago, it's the best of all of them today, right? So it's the one that for the first time in our minds can take Excel spreadsheets, pull them, manipulate them, analyze them, do things that nothing else can do. Right. And so I spent an hour or two on it today, and it was like the aha moment where I'm just like, wow, whatever you think it's going to be able to do, it's going to get there. And so then we had this whole discussion of like, okay, how do you then take it to the next level? And how do you embrace that change? We're thinking of we have 6 interns we bring in every year to our company over the summer. We might have all of them have computer science and data science backgrounds and input them into the asset management team and the operation team and the leasing team and the acquisition team. So not people who want to be in acquisition, but people who will be able to use the data and use AI to make us better. So I think our entire internship program will be related to that this year, which I think it'll be very helpful, because it's hard to take something like we're all talking about and put it through the whole organization. Because, for example, lease abstracting, right? We can all talk about it. Anybody wants to talk about it, great. We looked at 18 different versions to do lease abstracting. We found one that we loved. It was great. It could do everything we want. We're ready to roll it out. And then what happens? Literally like a week before rolling out, a better one comes up. And literally now we're testing the better one, and we're like, wait a second. So it becomes very hard to roll something out when it's iterating. And like Claude 4.5 is the best, but what's going to come next with Gemini and Copilot and ChatGPT? So I guess what I would say is, commit the time, which we have done. You've got to commit the dollars. For us, it's a 7-figure commitment every year, because the data is not inexpensive and the people are not inexpensive. And then you just have to get your company to embrace that AI, and you celebrate it and you figure out. Because I think the other thing that Steve said that was really important is it can improve a highly skilled worker by 40%. And a lot of what we were talking about today was, how do we improve our highly skilled workers? Because we want to free them up to have the time to use their brains instead of doing what would be minutia work that we all get stuck with every day. So there'll be a larger discussion, but that's sort of how our company has looked at it.
Great. Thanks, JM. We'll get back to you. Pretty impressive what you're doing. Mark, you actually come from a technology background also. Can you give us some of your background and
Sure.
insights as an investor with looking at AI?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on this panel, Reza. And we look at all this technology a little different way. We're looking at practical approaches to what we do each and every day, and try to apply what's available and try to eliminate or try to make people's jobs as easy as possible to do. So the first, obviously, thing that we've looked at with AI is how do we make the job of the analyst easier? So we've obviously released abstraction is available for the other people. We wrote our own as well. It does a very good job. But the next step after that you have a lease abstraction, is you want to take that data that it creates and try to do analysis on it. So compare it against what you're getting from the brokers when you're looking at buying a property, for example. All the leases that you have all the data in them, but do they match with what the brokers are telling you about the property? So AI is great at doing that analysis. Next step after that, doing the underwriting, doing the 10-year cash flow analysis, and being able to create an interactive tool so you can actually talk to this thing like you would talk to your analyst and get the job done. So those are the kind of the steps that we look at trying to put in to this type of tool that we're creating. But what's important with regards to AI is going to be everywhere, but it also has its limitations. So, obviously, if you're doing contracts reviews, it can help you. It can answer a lot of questions, so you don't even have to call your lawyer. You can just load your leases or new leases that you're trying to negotiate and ask a question that'll give you an answer. So it saves you time from even calling your lawyer or your accountant for that matter. So we try to use the approach that let's use these tools because they're changing so rapidly each and every day to the best that we can to try to be as efficient as possible in what we do, which is locate real estate, buy real estate, and manage real estate. On the management side, obviously, there's lots of tools that are available from an accounting perspective. Those are all being enhanced also as well with the tools that are coming in. So as far as long term, what's going to happen? Obviously, once you take the AI tools and you merge them with robotics, a lot could happen. With regards to restaurants, restaurants could use them to do their whole back operations. Warehouses are already using robotics to do what they need to do in warehouses. So quite a bit could change. The main question is, from my perspective, what do you really tell younger people that they could study that allows them not only just to use these tools, but also be able to later on have jobs? I mean, one of the groups that we work with is UCI locally. They just had the whole class graduate, and so far in the electrical engineering and computer science, they're finding a tough time finding jobs, right? So that's going to become more and more prevalent, and trying to figure out ways that they could maybe teach themselves to become more proficient at developing products, developing solutions. That's going to be really key to be able to later on be useful in society.
So Mark, you actually had a major technology company sale to that. I think the patent's still being used, right, by a lot of
Correct.
companies.
We developed basically the solid state technology that's currently being used in all of the high-end computing products. And that was developed in 2006, 7, and rolled out. And all the flash storage you see right now basically uses the basic technology that we developed back then.
But you came into real estate. So when you're looking at AI, how do you feel that, what's your view of what the impact of, how's that going to change your approach as an investor?
It's really key. And, we invest in usually grocery anchored shopping centers, and making sure that the locations that you buy and the mix of tenants that you have is more experiential versus just a place that you could go and buy your groceries and come home. Making sure that the people that are going there, they're able to go see their dentist, go do their workout, go to get their coffee, find many reasons that people would go and visit these locations than just having a shopping center that is providing just a utility to people.
Great. Well, we'll come back to you, Mark. Thanks. Michael, I had Michael one time at a YPO real estate call, and people said, "Oh, you got to have him back." Michael works with a lot of prop tech companies and got great insights. So please give us kind of an overview on your background and also what you're seeing on the prop tech side.
Thanks, Reza. It's great to be with everybody. And Steve, phenomenal presentation as always. So
Thank you.
So just my world. So I run a large conference in New York. I hope everybody will can attend in October. I think it's the 20th and 21st at the Javits Center. It's all around, some people like to say prop tech. We'll say prop tech, whatever. I mean, for me, it's just about real estate, technology, and innovation. So that's at the Javits, a couple thousand people. And I'm an active angel investor in the ecosystem as well. So my lens will be about, what does the startup community look like? I'll just touch on pre-AI, phase and then post. Although it's been around for, as Steve said, for so long. So just taking a step back, if you look at the prop tech sector and, thinking about it from 2010 to say now, I don't know the number, but let's guesstimate that was about $100 billion invested in the ecosystem. I mean, just an extraordinary amount of money, and yet adoption with these thousands and thousands of startups has been really slow for a variety of reasons. It's been a challenge to integrate a lot of these point solutions. It's a lot of time and resources as I said, integrate them within a real estate company that's not historically been technology adopters. And it's also like, as to Steve said, it's been very expensive to stand up a startup, just in terms of talent, infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. So clearly there were some breakout ones that have done really, really well. But in a macro sense, adoption has been a laggard. And then if we think about like today forward as the era of AI within the built environment, I think it's a tale of two completely different markets. I think with a lot of these AI native startups that are coming and are already scaling, I think it's less venture dollars. It's less dependent upon raising a lot of money. It doesn't require as much human resources and talent in terms of bodies. And I think that clearly, as we heard from these great panelists, the ROI is immediate. And I think that's the difference with sort of prop tech 1.0 versus 2.0, which is where we're at now, is that all these great leaders can quantify the immediate impact on their organization in terms of time savings, potentially making better decisions, in terms of lowering their overhead, potentially, which we're already starting to see. So I think the impact is immediate. And I think the other thing is that we're seeing startups emerge that are really attacking end-to-end solutions. In other words, as opposed to just a siloed, and there's a lot of good ones that'll attack certain inefficiencies in the built environment, of which there are an extraordinary amount of inefficiencies in our industry. We're starting to see ones that emerge that can really be end-to-end. Now, the one question I have is, on this panel, we mentioned Claude, we mentioned Gemini, we mentioned ChatGPT. How many real estate companies are going to be adopting, the big six or whatever they are, versus deploying maybe some, emerging startups that are industry specific? I think that needs to be played out. But I think there's a couple that I would just like. Placer is a great one, but I think when I think about like these sort of AI native startups, I think there's a couple that you could look at. I think you could look at Elise AI at the top end of the market that's been using AI to automate the leasing process end to end, particularly on multifamilies. Very, very successful company. Another one, a Document Crunch on the construction side. A couple that I know personally very well is Outcome, which is really on attacking the workflow. GatherGov, which is focused on analyzing local government meetings and delivering a sentiment around should you be looking at this marketplace, what potential outcome, roadblocks, or what have you, to getting to faster, better decisions, whether it's acquisitions or approvals. And then Dialed, I think AI is a really good one on the investment memorandum side. So I think we're starting to see the emergence of some really, really innovative, impactful AI native startups in the ecosystem right now. So I think the future is really, really bright for the tech sector. And then if I could just end my brief commentary with a question to Steve. Steve, sorry, Reza, for taking over the MC
So
spot.
before you ask that question,
Yeah.
Michael, let me just ask one question, then you can ask Steve that question. So, one of the questions that is come up, because you have such a good overview of all the tech companies in real estate. So what's your advice to, investors that have a portfolio and they want to get, so do they create in-house? Do they buy, I'm dating myself, but right out of college, I actually have an engineering background. So I went to work for Fluor Daniel, which is a Fluor public company, major construction firm. So I remember Fluor used to be so proud of their CAD program. That it was the industry, so everybody looked at CAD. They created these three-dimensional models on computer, which was those days was unheard of. And AutoCAD was just doing like little homes. And they used to make fun of it. And little by little, AutoCAD kept going and going. And all of a sudden, Fluor ended up completely incorporating AutoCAD and getting rid of their in-house because they couldn't compete with the commercial version. Right, their in-house people couldn't compete. So, what is your thoughts on like where do people go from here? Do they research a third-party company? Do they create in-house?
I mean, I think it's the multi-trillion dollar question, Reza. I think, from my point of view, I think it would be to take a step back and just, I think the questions are, what parts of your organization do you want to attack, and improve, and get better at? And then I think it's really looking at what's existing right now. And I think the good thing about a lot of these emerging startups that are the AI natives is they want to work with your organization, to in a bit in a whether it's a beta format, like I know that GatherGov is very early, and they're going out and working with each, of their beta testers, very intimately, with their teams, and helping them arrive at the outcomes, the outputs that they're really looking for. So I think for me, it would probably be to look at your organization and determine, okay, it's on the lease abstract, I think, is, what Sandy might have said, or it's on, the investment sales underwriting process. That would be my recommendation, because I think that's a way to go to dip your toe into it and really see in a much more specific, focused way what some of the outcomes would be, using AI. But that's the way I would approach it. But I think my question, Reza, for Steve would be, Steve, you've seen, so many startups since you and I've been on this journey together. I wonder, running now the Met Fund, right, your MIT focused fund, um, what do the startups look like today that are different than you might have seen, or you and I might have seen a couple years ago?
It's a good question. By the way, thanks for the shout out to Elise AI, a woman founder who's an MIT alum. So, it's just a great company. And so what is different? Well, the teams are smaller, they're scaling faster, and they need less money. That's that's it. And it's pretty remarkable. And so it does beg the question, is there a future for startups? I wonder, Reza, that example you gave of the design and the AutoCAD, might it go in the opposite direction? I'm a real estate owner. I get an outside solution. I learn what it can do and how it works. But the AI is well, in the future, could be so easy that I might bring it in-house rather than the other way around, where I go out of house because the out of house product is better. Maybe that could happen, in a couple of cases. So, but that's my answer, Michael. It's just different than it was when you and I got in the game 10, 12, 15 years ago, and also Sandy and everybody else on the panel. The startups just feel different. They look different. They're faster, leaner, and need less funding. They still need funding, but they need less funding.
And how about on the robotics side, Steve? Because you and I have talked a lot about that. Sandy brought it up. What are you seeing on that front?
Well, so this is very interesting. The breakthroughs that are happening in robotics that were not the operating systems for robots are getting much more sophisticated, and to the point where now the robots can learn. And I never thought I would. I hesitate to use that word learn around AI, but the robots are now getting responsive and dynamic, and they are learning. And so MIT is doing some of this work. Carnegie Mellon is doing it, but I'll let the other panelists comment on this idea of anything that is somewhat robotic used to be hard coded, except now they're going to be able to learn, and it's already happening, where they can I'm using the word learn. They can learn.
And when you say learn, is it like literally, I think, Steve, I've seen where they visually watch and then they do the same thing rather than you had to program it, right?
Oh, here's the other, and I know MIT's done this, but other people have, where they'll watch the human picking and packing, and they'll replicate it, or they'll watch the human putting the bolt on the rotor on the drive, and they'll replicate it, and it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing, and that's only possible. And I'm not as enough of a tech guy to understand what changed in the actual technology, but I'll open it up. Those of you who have technical background, Mark, what is it that's allowing robots to learn by observing?
Again, it's understanding the tools that is available, is all that LLM technology that is being incorporated. They're learning from the movements that the humans make, and they have an understanding of those movements and how our joints work, and that's how they learn from that. Yeah. Again, going back to also your point with regards to bringing in some of this technology, these tools are so powerful that you don't need 50 engineers anymore to develop them and develop. I mean, our team is only two people. Yeah. And least abstractions, of course, it's the simplest thing that you do, with all these additional work that happens with the use of Claude and being able to manipulate, the spreadsheets. You can create products that fits your needs much better than going out and buying these tools that are probably designed for a bigger audience than your specific need. And with few engineers, you can get those point products that makes your job a lot easier to do.
I think, Mark, you said that you don't use Argus, right? You use your AI.
That's correct.
And Mark, how long ago did you start that in your organization? Like realizing that 10 years, 20 years?
No. I mean, I've always tinkered with technology, selling my technology in 2013 to Western Digital. After that, I've stayed in touch with the engineers that used to work for me. So we do products from time to time. This endeavor is maybe 6 months old.
Right, but your culture has always been one that's embraced that kind of stuff.
That's correct. I mean, I've always tried to see, what can we build inexpensively that has not only use for ourselves, but possibly for other people.
Right, because I think if you, and I think Sandy lives in that same world as well, and so do we. So I think as you think about how you, as somebody on this webinar, thinking about how do you do it, you just have to start embracing it, right? It has to be
that's really
your culture. There's no way to make it happen. Sandy's been doing it for so long, right? Think about how early he was in place.
The next thing that we're looking at is, how do we find properties that fit our model but are not available in the market? So try to use AI to automate, reach out to areas that we want to buy. Owners that possibly want to sell, and try to automate that process to be able to find leads and find properties that we would want to engage and buy that are not in the market.
Right, because ultimately, like when we started in 1960, the market was super inefficient. Like, go shake a hand, get a deal done. Nobody else was there. Then it got, brokers came. It got very efficient. And so our goal would hope to be that we can use AI to bring out some inefficiencies again in the buy operate market so we can deliver better returns. But I think that is a possibility if you embrace it early enough and sort of figure it out so that you can build an agent that can help your acquisition team to sort through 100 OMs instead of the 5 that they sort through because they get a broker calling about those 5.
I actually saw a presentation by a tech startup a couple of weeks ago that does that. They pull all the packages. It kind of creates like a report, standard report. It was pretty impressive.
Yeah. Well, I think the trick is, and Jam, and I think you're right about this. The key is, I think you're right about a lot of things. I think the key here is you want to be enough ahead of the marketplace so that you're there before it becomes table stakes, right? I mean, Jim, when you and I started, REZA 2, I mean, we used to run around with Thomas Guide maps, right? I mean, and you go and you call Pete, you pull title reports, and just think about the process, right? That's unimaginable.
And then,
right?
Hey, Sandy, remember when the property we're looking at was off one map and on the next? So you're like,
you had to
that's the
key
worst
to
property
it
to buy because you don't know which page it's on.
No, and you would hire people to put all maps together. But so the key here is you got to be an early enough adapter so that you have a little bit of runway, right? I mean, like you said, Jim, you were in Placer early, like I was in Placer. We had a run of the road for a couple of years because while people were slowed uptick, we knew data that other people didn't have. So, part of that is where you're in the adoption cycle, because there's always early adapters, mid-time adapters, late adapters, right? Late adapters, I think in this case, will just go out of business because, so how do we create alpha for us? And the way you create it is you're going to have to constantly iterate. And that's what people in this call need to understand, is that this is a forever adopt, use, discard, and iterate, right? A
So
scenario.
Sandy, what's your organization look like? If you obviously have adopted at the top and you've got other people. Who else, like, is there a head of data science? Does everybody just know this is what you're doing? Like, how does it cycle through the organization?
Yeah, so we did two things that I think in retrospect worked pretty well. We one is we have this Bright Street Ventures, which is a company that's really run by my brother, who started with me, but then went through the data thing, and he does a lot of the work around what are the companies out there that are sort of interesting that we should look at and we should spend time with, and get to the point where we could test them through the system. And then we have a group here called the Newmark Merrill side, who try things out in the real world and see which ones meet the cut and so on and so forth. And then, but I think this is the key, we have someone who is responsible solely for making sure that once we think there's a product or something we want to iterate, that they teach people in different parts of the company how to use them, that we get champions in each part of the company. You have an accounting champion, a leasing champion, an acquisition champion. You have these champions because you need that data. For us, I mean, everyone on this call, we get it, right? The key is who's going to adopt it, and then what do we learn from that adoption? And I actually think this question of whether we build or buy is going to become more of a hybrid answer, because I think what's going to happen is you're going to have open source that you're going to be able to use the system now to customize, right? Because where we get screwed, I'm sure we've all gotten screwed, is we buy packages and you ask them to customize it to meet your needs, cost you a fortune, takes forever. There's a lot of back and forth, a lot of lost in translation. But with these new systems, like Mark's talking about, you'll just be able to customize them yourself. And I think that's what's going to get you. But I think we got to sign up for the journey. Again, I've seen this movie before just because of where I was. The front runners today are like the Smithsonian tomorrow, right? I mean, it's just the Smithsonian's still there. So I mean, that's kind of where we're going. So you have to have a culture. And Jam, you start talking about this. You tried all these things. That's journey. If you were too tied to any one technology, you'd be immediately disintermediated when the next technology came out if you were too tied to it. So you have to be prepared to discard and retry.
And Sandy, one thing, sorry, Tim, was one thing that we were all in Orlando for the YPO event. When the keynote speaker on AI said, "This is one you can't delegate." He said it starts with the CEO high level. So do you agree with that? Like you guys, like this is not something that you just get an IT.
No, you have, yeah. So to answer your question, here's what I say. This is hard work, right? And by the way, this is culture change. And by the way, it's scary. So leadership requires you to stand in front of your team and say, one, this is a commitment, and two, this is how you can choose to engage in the process, which I think will be a better outcome for you. And look, I stood in front of my accounting department last week and we were talking, and they're thinking, oh my God, how am I gonna lose my job? I said, no, I just bought you a free assistant, right? You have a free assistant. Your life just got better because all this other work that you did that you used to hate having to reset everything up was going to be done for you. And now you can actually do what you're good at. And so I think that leadership has to come from the top, to your point, Reza.
So
hey, Sandy, can
go ahead.
You mentioned, Sandy, something very interesting about spreadsheet in the early days of spreadsheets. And I opened this up to the whole group, but I'm wondering, how long do you run dual programs because you don't trust the technology? So we know that the LLMs, they lie, they're wrong, they're only as good as the data. But when do we stop back testing to make sure they're right? How long was that in spreadsheets, do you think?
I mean, I think that's where you said it, right? I mean, you'll never replace common sense. I mean, look, I see this still with, with my teams. I hate to say it, where they give me a set of numbers. We know because we have experience that the numbers are wrong, but they believe it because it's a column of numbers that have got to add it up. Common sense isn't as common as we think, right? So for us, I think that's what ensures that the robots won't put us all away. They're going to need us for a while.
So the
But
other
I would
thing
imagine there
think
would be
about
this
is-
transition, or JM, you can go ahead,
because
JM.
the other thing I think about is like a lot of the stuff that we talk about today, like we have a feed that comes from ADP every 2 weeks. So we get the payroll for 1/4 of the United States into our office every 2 weeks because the BLS data, we've never liked it and don't use it. But when we talk about getting data like that, and when I talk about what I talked about with Claude 4.5, it is messy. We are not in these beautiful things where you can put things in and get the answers you want. That will be, by the time you have that, you will be behind, right? Because when I just saw the demonstration of Claude, it looked like we were programming in BASIC. Like it was this weird screen, like we were going to launch a space shuttle. Like it wasn't like this beautiful, beautiful font. So we all have to understand that it's not as easy as what we're talking about in terms of you just pick it and roll it out. Now, yes, on lease abstract, somebody will make it look pretty, but they may get left behind while they're making it look pretty with somebody else who's doing it better. That's what makes it really, really hard.
Yeah. So I think that's a key takeaway is that this stuff, you can't just enter all the information in, press the button and say, okay, we'll buy the building. That would be crazy.
No, you gotta create interactive tools that you could go and ask it questions and see what it's doing. And that's why I like to create these things. So they are just like your analyst. You just ask it questions, you give it your assumptions, and it's additive. Also, to your point, when do you trust these tools? Well, you trust these tools after you've done a few of them in parallel that they're at least as good as the analyst that you have. Because even people make mistakes. I've looked at leases, I've read leases, I've made mistakes on what the meaning of every paragraph is, and my tools now are doing a better job than even myself. So at some point, you cut the cord and you say the tool is as good as my analyst is going to do it because humans make mistakes as well, and you just go with it.
Yeah, but I think it goes to the skill set that I talked about before, which is you need adaptable, curious, and skeptical people, right? I mean, I think we ran a report. Placer is going to soon enough have a new thing that uses AI as part of its processing, and it went through 39 steps and created something that was absolutely beautiful. But when our team looked at it, they said, "Hey, these are the 2 or 3 things that are wrong." Okay, and that's you're going to have to do it. So it's still the old Reagan trust but verify. I think that's not going away. I mean, it'll get better, but it's not going away.
But Sandy, that new tool you talked about with Placer, because we're trying it also, is ridiculously more easy. So it's a factor of 100 times more easy than anybody on this call is using the regular group Placer today to get data you want, to analyze anything you want, to put it in plain English and have it out like this. It is unbelievable. To automate, like if you want to track your traffic to every single shopping center, it'll do it automatically for you monthly. If you want to compare where the Targets and Walmarts are within a mile of each other everywhere in the country, like it's so much easier. This time savings of this new model is unbelievable.
Right. Yeah. Example, today, and look, Placer's not that old a product, right? But today on that product, you would have to do at least what we did when we ran this query. You would have had to do 39 different menu drops, enter data, and gone through each one of those steps. Still, to most people on this call, would have been an amazing outcome. Now you just do it with like 2 sentences. It runs all 39 and out it comes. And it gives us the luxury. So the luxury that you've created for the human is now you can go through it and you're in an editing function. You're not an expert at menu navigation, right? So that's how it's changed. Things are changing.
So we have about 20 minutes left, and one area that we haven't touched on is, as investors, as we look at all these changes coming, is that changing our view of investing and changing a view of what is being impacted, how is it being impacted? Steve, you mentioned you guys looked at impact of AI on various asset classes. Maybe we could start with you. Can you give some thoughts on kind of help us see 5, 10 years down the road? What changes do you see happening in terms of asset classes, especially as it relates to shopping centers and its impact?
Well, I think space optimization is going to get on overdrive. We just did a report on warehouse, which is somewhat related to retail, but just the optimization of how much space you need to do what we're currently doing in distribution real estate. It's just going to get even more optimized. And then if you tie that into the distribution system, and this is where it gets to retail, if we have a better understanding of where you need products and when you need them and when they're in transit, does the whole system get more optimized? So do we need less space? I don't know. Maybe we need more space. But add to that autonomous vehicles and add to it robotics in the buildings. So that potentially is just one example. I think in retail, and you're the experts on retail. We don't claim to have particularly deep knowledge on retail, but understanding what the customer really wants and what they're willing to buy and when they're willing to buy it. I would imagine, and I put that out to those of you who are in the retail space, to have that kind of witchcraft, to be able to know that must impact how you think about the asset, I would think, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Look, I think that the value always went throughout history to the people who have the best access to information. So those were the kings of the early years. And as time gone on, the people who have the most information normally win, okay? Because we're in the risk adjusted return business. And so the biggest thing is, how do you judge risk? And are you getting a fair or extraordinary return on risk? And we now, look, I'm very partial to retail. I'm too late in my career to do anything different, but there's no product type in real estate that generates more information than retail. So, so I think that's a very hopeful sign. It's a scary sign too, because those who get that information, look at all the stuff JM does. I bet you 99.9% of the people who listen to this call don't even know half the data sources he's talking about, and he's thinking about them and analyzing them and doing all this stuff. And so, yeah, there's a real opportunity, but there's a risk if you get left behind, because JM's going to know a hell of a lot more than the guy he's competing with. And that's gonna cut both ways. To the space optimization thing, which I totally agree with. Again, I believe that micro distribution from stores is really going to be a thing. I mean, if you look what Amazon did with their stores, and how much was being delivered directly from stores to customers, getting closer to your customers. Today, frankly, it's done fairly inefficiently, right? They have human beings who go in, shop, put them in carts, and put them in a car and deliver them. I mean, that's all going to be robots, and that's going to go throughout the system, right?
Yeah.
And so the cost of delivery, the cost of moving into stores and moving it closer to existing real estate footprints, I think is going to make retail real estate more valuable.
And do we see, we know that Walmart has been kind of shrinking the front door foot traffic and expanding the back room foot traffic. And if you optimize inventory management, and then you've got robotics, and then you've got driverless and autonomous vehicles for delivery and I think Reza, you asked, what does 10 years look like? I think it sounds like science fiction, but I think it's actually going to come true.
But I think when I look at the world, it is, first off, let's all remember on retail, which everybody on this call and shopping centers knows, 50% of our retailers aren't retailers, right? So they are a service.
Right.
Their office, their medical office, their restaurants. And every single time, what's fascinating to me is how many of us 5 years ago would have thought we'd be leasing to pickleball places, right? Or how about Stretch Lab? Like, we're paying people to stretch us. And now we have a tenant called iSmash, where we just go in and smash stuff up. Like the tenant, and we're also already 94 or 95% occupied nationally. So, the tenants or uses just keep coming and iterate in a way that none of us will ever know, which is what gets me really comfortable with having really good real estate where your rents hopefully are already below market.
Yeah, Jamie, let me give you another one. We're doing some work on augmented reality. So what about all you need to build is a shell? and people arrive and they put on the new Meta glasses and their whole experience of that. Remember the hype and the promise around the metaverse? Okay, blah, blah, blah. But what if it's augmented? What if they walk into an empty big box store, but everybody has Meta glasses on and they have some kind of experiential activity that we would call retail? And then you don't have any build out at all. So I think to your point, we're going to see these different types of experiences that we'll call retail, but it'll be very broadly defined. That's
By the
what
way,
I
but
think.
the real risk to retailers today with those Meta glasses, because you're starting to see it, is people are walking in with their cameras on those glasses. They have a really bad interaction. They filmed it and then they
Yeah.
post it, and it's become, or they go into a jewelry store and they film the person, and then people figure out who the person is, and then you're worried about the person going home and not being safe. So it's
Right.
like
Yeah, there's
this
a lot of
whole thing that's
downside.
going to play out
Yeah.
in those glasses in public settings, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Steve, I see a sort of a COVID analogy here, which is when you deprive people of human connection, they crave it even more. And
True.
I think that as we automate more and you see more non-human interaction, places where you can create human interaction, like what we do, the value of that will go up.
They get more valuable.
They
Yeah.
get more valuable.
Yeah.
And that's what we saw during COVID, right? I mean,
Right.
people felt couldn't go to the office, couldn't work. You could tell them that they could get a terrible virus and might die, but they would still come because they wanted to get out of the house. They want to see human beings. That's primal, right? So that's a little hard coded. So that's where I think everything points in that direction still.
Well, we might get a whole
Michael?
part of our life that's fully automated and seamless and we don't think about, but then now these other experiences become even more important and even more valuable to us.
So, Michael, I'm just interested in the CREtech that you have that's coming up in New York. How much of that group has become AI over time that didn't exist, and how are those AI new products thinking of like just putting something on the front end of OpenAI or a Claude? Like, what's the market look like that you're seeing come into that environment? Is he still there?
We got you mic'd there, Michael.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jim. I think the first takeaway quickly was, because there's a couple questions in there too, but thank you for the questions, Jim. I think the first takeaway for me was, and Steve was at the show, I've never seen so many C-suites show up at a prop tech conference. CEOs of Bozzuto, PGIM, Ares, like every asset class, Tanger, Stephen Yaloff was there as a good friend. Like, I was just like, what are you guys doing here, at a prop tech conference? And, they all just are AI curious, JM. Like, that's the biggest takeaway for me was, oh my gosh, we finally got the industry's attention and they're showing up. And I just think that the level of innovation now is just unprecedented. Steve would talk about. Just one other thought, and then Reza, there's a great question from T in the chat from GatherGov that I saw. Just one other thought as you were talking, Reza, about going out there 5-10 years and what does it look like? I think the other part that I think about a lot, Stephen and you and I have talked about it a lot as well, is what AI's impact is going to be on energy and the grid. Right? There are some statistics that I've read, and whatever the number is, it doesn't matter. It's a big effing number. It's like 21 trillion to upgrade the grid, right? And I'm not talking just about the impact in terms of energy prices and electricity. It's more like, how does the built environment create new asset classes, or how does the built environment create new revenue streams, capitalizing on buildings as power sources, as virtual power plants, or sort of edge computing, edge data centers and things like that. So I think what we're going to see, and it's every asset class, is an explosion of forward-thinking real estate companies understanding that they've got on these assets power sources, which could lead to additional revenue streams, not just resiliency and mitigation. It's kind of something I think about a lot. But anyway,
Hey,
rest of the
Michael, I'll give a shout out to a
yeah,
cool
no,
MIT company that's just been formed around a technology. Some of the brainiacs over in the whatever material science department, they've got a concrete they've mixed carbon black into the aggregate so that concrete can now be used as battery storage.
that's what I'm talking about. There you go. Of course,
That kind of stuff. I mean, I get
that
to,
kind of stuff.
every day I'm grateful I get to come to a place like MIT where this is what people are working on. But you make a good point that what if all of our poured concrete is battery storage, and what if all of the windows generate power? And we're going to have to figure this out because there's not enough capacity to support the vision for all of the AI stuff. Anyway,
So, guys, we have 10 more minutes about, and just we're seeing all these tectonic shifts happening everywhere. Is that changing your approach to investments, JM, in terms of what you look at?
I mean, so we only buy shopping centers and apartments. So the
In
data
terms of what kind of shopping centers
we
you buy?
buy, so we'll buy, our fund goal is 15 to 18 net IRRs. So we're buying opportunistically. It could be grocery anchor. We call it grocery anchor with upside. Mostly we probably bought, I don't know, 3 or 4 million square feet in the past 5 years. And so it's all over the United States. And so it is not changing what we buy, but the data and the AI will change how we look at the opportunities. So it's giving us a better view into what we're buying. I think it's making us smarter in making those buys, right? It reminds me of, as Sandy said, when we all started using Placer, we ended up buying a shopping center in Texas at a really high cap rate that we realized because a Placer had the number one Hobby Lobby, the number one Specs, and the number one Vision Mart in the United States for traffic, right? And so when we're the only one with that data, you can make better decisions. So I think we're making better decisions. On our multifamily side, again, we are using different data and AI to, I think, make better decisions. We use ADP, we use paychecks, we take those, we put them in our own system. And we are just trying to figure out, when you look at CoStar or Axio or any of those, our goal is to find out where we believe there's outside rent growth on the multifamily side, where CoStar would not think that. Because if we're using the same data everybody else is using, we're all chasing the same properties. So that's that but we have not like shifted our entire focus of what we're going to buy, how we're going to buy it, how we think of whole period, anything like that. It's just how we go through that process. It's changed.
How about you,
I'd
Mark?
be interested. Has anybody else made a shift? That would be interesting to me. Like somebody who shifted.
Yeah, any of you, Mark, Sandy?
Yeah, we're now obviously this data center business is quite a big business, and we're looking into that side to do these edge data centers that are closer to civilization than being in the middle of nowhere. The latency difference between being in the middle of nowhere and being close makes a huge difference. They don't need to be huge. Even a 50 megawatts data center that's closer to town has a utility, and location of these things being close to, let's say, military sites or sites that are for government use also makes sense. So that's another kind of a vertical that we're looking at entering into.
Mark, can you repurpose existing buildings at all for those smaller micro data centers? Or do you have to build new?
The key is power, right? So, and when we say power, it's not just from the grid. You need power from the grid. You need to have power generation that would be a backup to that, being either gas generated or, diesel generated power. And then you also need batteries as well. So whatever amount of power you have in these data centers, you need to make sure that that power is available basically when three things fail, right? So so the space is actually the smaller issue with it. So normally, as you know, industrial buildings, between $100 and $150 a square foot, you can go build them wherever you want to go build them. But these data centers, when you add up the power generation, and power backup, you're talking about $1,000 a square foot that you're spending on building it out.
Wow.
So that's really the key behind them. And there's a lot of new technology again coming that you don't need. Like we're looking at data centers with emergent technology where all of the computers are buried into this kind of an oil that cools the computers much faster than air or water would. And that again becomes a differentiator from the standpoint that, as you said, you don't need million square feet data centers. The data density and also the power density is much higher in when you're using immersion technology than when you're using air cooled as well.
So we have 5 more minutes, everyone. Like to end.
One question for you. What would happen if AI and robotics create system that gets rid of the grocery stores like Amazon has and becomes really successful at doing it? Any thoughts?
Well, I guess in your question, are you saying because of robotics does what that eliminates the
in Europe, they have these purpose-built grocery shops that is completely done with robotics. There's no people in it.
Right.
And they end up delivering the grocery anchored very just like 2-hour delivery, but nobody's really touching it, and it's showing up to your door. So how much is that going to really affect grocery shopping is really the key.
Yeah. Look, from my perspective, and this is my perspective, I think that I don't think that the delivery part, I mean, I think the customer decides where they want to spend their time, and there's a decent element in delivery. And again, I go back to the COVID model, right, where delivery was the de facto, should have been the de facto delivery system, and it wasn't. So I don't look. Do I think there's going to be changes in the efficiency of how groceries get delivered or groceries get stocked? I actually think pricing is going to get better for the consumer over time because of the cost to stock, the ability to order properly, the ease of check in and check out. But I have a hard time believing that we're going to live in a world where people don't make that part of their mission, or at least a certain amount of people will make it their mission to go out and shop and buy groceries. I really just see that as, look, at our core, we're hunter gatherers, right? And and that's that's primal, and I think that's where it goes. And we were tested on that once before, which again, COVID's that example. So no, I think efficiency is important. So like Walmart's a winner, and Target's been having some issues, and I think they're catching up and they're trying to fix where they were. Efficiency is going to be a huge issue, but does it change shopping behavior? No, unless costs are dramatically different. I mean, if it was 50% less to get food delivered than it was to shop, that might be a tipping point. But until that happens, I don't think so.
To add to your comments, Andy, a tech investor I was listening to, he said the reason he thinks Walmart's earning per share or multiple is 40 is because they already are viewing it as a technology kind of beneficiary of the AI in terms of how they're going to process. JM, how about you? Any thoughts on what Mark said?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of look at it from an investment standpoint. So one of the things I do worry about a little bit is you have to be very sure that on an individual basis, because cap rates on small grocery anchored shopping centers are relatively low, right? You're talking about 5.5, 6. And so I always think about buying those and what would happen in that individual shopping center if there wasn't a grocery store and that cap rate went up by 100 or 150 basis points. I don't want to take that risk. I also think about on a grocery store, if it's $30 a square foot, and I really think the turnover is down to 15, because look, not all grocery stores make it, but it's a matter of who the next one coming in is. I don't think it goes away. How many of us have ordered from sort of Instacart? It never ever is right. They replace it. It's not what you ordered. The wife complains about it. Mindy.
No, the AI is going to fix that. The AI is going to fix that.
We will see if it fixes it. But Kroger just announced like they're going to deliver out of their stores. Like they already have the real estate. So unless they're filing bankruptcy and Publix and Kroger have a lot of cash, that's not going to happen. That's a long wind down in my book to get to the point where they could disappear on me.
So guys, we're out of time. I'm already getting some messages. People are really loving this discussion.
Thank you, everyone.
Maybe I'll ask you guys, hopefully maybe in about 6 months or a year, we'll regroup again. But any parting thoughts before we go? We got less than a minute. Any thoughts before we say goodbye?
No, this was great. Thank you, everybody.
And
Thank you.
thanks for doing
Thank you,
this,
everybody. Have a
Reza,
great
Remez. I really
holiday.
appreciate it.
Thank you, Reza.
Thanks,
See you
Steve.
again.
Great
I
job.
want to thank you guys for being on this call. Really appreciate all your feedback, and want to wish our audience also thank you for being there, and happy holidays to all of you, and happy New Year. Look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Reza.
Thanks.
Take care.
Take care, guys.
Reza. I think the next webinar will just be AI agents. We won't we'll all be replaced.
We'll talk to your AI agents, Michael. Take care, guys.
Take care.
See you.
Thanks.
Bye.